I'm not going to give a lengthy introduction. I'm going to ask each of the Moores, to not related, to give their own introduction. So let's start with you, Dan.
Thank you very much, Tom. Yeah, like I said, me and Beth aren't related. This is just a coincidence, right? It's not a conspiracy. I'm Dan. I'm the creative director at Dissident. We're a social-first creative agency that works with construction brands. And essentially, the business is split into sort of two halves. It's one half production company, one half social media marketing agency. We just create cool content that gets engagement for our brands.
Beth.
Thank you. Yeah, very weird coincidence that we're both Moores, but we are not related and we're not married. So we may argue, but that doesn't mean we're a married couple. But yes, my name is Beth. I'm Head of Client Services at Door 4. We're a performance marketing agency for home and garden brands, essentially delivering our performance activity to drive ROI and revenue for our clients.
Right, let's start with Dan. Your content at Dissident always comes across as very authentic, often unexpected. What's your approach? How do you go about it? And I suppose the follow-up question is why?
Okay. I mean, inherently, I've always kind of strived to be different in almost everything that I do, most of the time in life in general, really. And that kind of translates into the agency as well. And it just so happens that differentiation is a really good marketing tactic. When it comes to down to content, where essentially what we're aiming to do is differentiate our clients from their competitors, and the word dissident, which is our brand, is all about going against the grain, and our clients are the dissidents. They're the ones that are in a particular market doing something kind of interesting, and what we want to do is capture that. So differentiation is a huge element. So let's say we do a bit of comparator analysis. We're looking at doing a campaign for a particular product. We look at all the competitors and what they're doing. Typically in the construction industry and manufacturing, what you'll find is that a large percentage all kind of looks the same. It's all kind of wishy-washy a lot of the time. And that's like a historical thing, not necessarily these days. What we'll do is we'll look at like sort of the landscape and we'll go, okay, how can we flip this on its head, do something that catches people's attention and is really creative from a visual point of view, and make something cool. The ultimate thing is make something cool, really.
So, as you say, there's a lot of commonality between what products people are putting out on the market, and differentiating them is quite nuanced, quite difficult to differentiate. Have you read kind of How Brands Grow by Byron Sharp, and that difference between distinctiveness and differentiation? Because I think what you've landed on is distinctiveness.
Yes.
And creating that within brands. Actually, what's the nuts and bolts? How do you achieve it? How do you make a brand stand out through the content?
I mean, a lot of it's to do with the visuals, right?
Yeah.
It's the easiest way of, especially on social media, which is our thing. Creating content that is visually unique and different. So it's got to have some sort of visual impact to it that's kind of creative and interesting. Dissident as a whole has got like a look to it. A lot of people say it's like a dark, gritty, moody kind of vibe. And it just so happens that works really well in construction because it was, it's just something that works. I think that the end users resonate with it really well, and that's what makes a lot of our stuff stand. We can do non-gritty stuff as well, but that's what our clients tend to like. And it comes from a point of view of like, my team are a mix of photographers, videographers, creatives, and marketers. And what they're looking to do is try and create the coolest thing they can with the skills that they've got, as opposed to looking at what someone else is doing and going, I'll do that, but slightly better. And that's what we don't want to do. We want to kind of flip it on its head, do something completely different and creative. A lot of that's down to lighting, pre-production, scripting, telling a story, things like that. Does that answer the question? Is that okay?
Yeah. That's good. Kind of moving a little bit on, we'll come back to creative in a moment, but looking a little bit more at the kind of scientific side of things. How is SEO changing and some of the dynamics around paid versus organic social?
I think social-wise, especially coming into Dan's point on creative, obviously it's getting more and more competitive everywhere, both organically and social and through paid. More people are doing paid activity now than they ever have. And a lot of that's down to just not getting the same organic social reach. A lot of our clients, and from what I've seen in the industry, the challenge at the minute is just costs going up, cost per clicks are on the rise. That's from both a Google perspective, but because Google are putting the costs up, people are going to social. So it's putting Meta costs up, TikTok, Pinterest, all of the cost per clicks are just on the rise as an industry. So if you're going to be paying more for that click, you want it to be from the right people and really make sure you have stood out, which a lot does come into that creative point of actually how do you get someone to engage with your activity when we're just seeing a sea of adverts by multiple competitors and paying more for the privilege.
I mean, the social media platforms seem to be always changing their algorithms, and the same goes for SEO as well. That Google's always changing up its algorithms. How on earth do you, as an agency, as an expert in this, stay on top? But how does a brand that their business is creating bathroom products and getting them to market, how does anyone stay on top of it?
I think a lot of it comes down to using what the platforms say is best practice, but testing. A lot of what Google are doing from a paid perspective in Google Ads is shifting to automation, AI, using Google's technology to benefit what they see as the campaigns. But I think anyone who's maybe done Google Ads will know if you literally do plug and play and let Google recommendations apply automatically, you spend a hell of a lot of money, don't necessarily get a lot back. So it's using that strategically to say, well, actually, what do I want to get from this? How do I use that technology to benefit my campaign? But also having the strategic person sat behind it saying, no, I'll use it in this way. Especially with organic at the minute, from a SEO standpoint, we're seeing click-through rates just tank because Google is showing more and more from an AI overview. So most people now are seeing that click-through rate drop on search, hence go into more of the social channels and needing more of a creative steer.
When we were doing the prep call for this, I asked, what platforms still work for organic, what are pay for play, and you always kind of like laughed at me. Well, let's run through the panels and kind of the different platforms and how they work.
To answer your question, I'm still kind of racking my brain with like what is still a relatively okay organic platform, and the tricky thing is, I'm going to say a lot of it depends probably in this talk because it really does depend. Because for brands, brands are the most difficult kind of entities on social media to grow organically. So if you're a personal brand, if you're an individual, if you're a creator, you can grow really well organically. But as soon as you slap a logo on it, it's really, really difficult. So like Instagram, as a brand, really hard to grow organically. You can do it. You have strategies in place, but just posting.
Is that because of reader behavior or algorithm?
I couldn't answer that. I would guess it's algorithm because I would as a business, I would want the businesses on my platform to pay to be seen. That's the business model that I would do if I was social media for sure. Whereas the creators and the sort of the personal brand stuff, I would be happy for those guys to grow organically because they're not a business essentially. They're not going to pay.
I think it ties in completely to that point of as a platform, they're always going to prioritize the paid element. And even now, when you do an Instagram search, you'll get the For You section, which is tailored to you and meant to be an algorithm tailored to you. You get ads within that now. So even though it's an organic feel, the platform's essentially going to monetize that and make sure that people who want to be appearing in those places have to pay to be there. And that's where I think it comes back to Daniel's point of, you need to pay to be there if you are a brand.
Bearing in mind we've got quite a diverse audience ranging from brands to perhaps installers that may even be one man or woman bands.
Yes.
How do the different platforms work for each of those different sorts of business? So let's start with Facebook, which is probably the oldest platform, I would say.
I would have said so. I think Twitter came probably after that, didn't it? Or X. Facebook. Certainly, we've seen a massive decline in Facebook organically with all of our brands. I don't know the stat. I can't remember. It's still got a huge user base. Like Facebook's still massive, like a lot of these things, it really just depends on your strategy and what kind of business you are. Because the logic says if you're a if you're a brand and that your target market or your end user is a tradesperson, tradespeople typically are on Facebook because they've got but Facebook business pages. They've local tradespeople advertising themselves to a local audience, and they've got a large audience there. So if you're trying to market towards a tradesperson, it would make sense for you to be on Facebook, right? Because they're all there with their own business pages and actively on there trying to market on there themselves. So it makes perfect sense to be on Facebook. But what we're seeing is like just huge declines in organic growth.
I think it ties in as well because you'll have your Facebook page, but because traditionally from a trades perspective, a lot of it will be word of mouth of kind of, oh, you need this guy, or oh, you need such a body who's really good. And they'll send them the page to go to get that kind of authority and trust factor to see maybe like previous work examples, but they're not going to just see that by scrolling through Facebook. So having the presence there is obviously important, but then also knowing that you're not just going to be a showing for that, you're going to probably have people sending people there. And in the same way, adapting even like your targeting, if you're running ads, yes, Facebook may be in decline, but if you're targeting an older demographic who are still on Facebook looking at pictures of grandchildren, they will still be there. Whereas if you want that younger demographic, you're probably going to target more of your placements to the likes of Instagram. So it's just really understanding like who's that demographic and where are they spending their time, and putting your effort essentially into the right places.
Well, let's stick with Meta for a moment. In Instagram, kind of how does that work, and kind of what sort of posts should the different members of the audience consider on Instagram?
It depends. I think there's going to be
theme.
Yeah. I always when you think about what kind of stuff to post as a brand, you've got to think about what your positioning is as a brand to your audience. One of the things that I don't agree with on social media necessarily, I'm happy to be wrong on this, is there will be strategies in place for certain platforms. Oh, that this platform prefers more sort of raw, lo-fi content, so you guys should be doing that. But if you're a really prestigious, high-end brand, it doesn't bode well with me that you're kind of posting like sort of like fuzzy kind of like getting on trends and stuff like that. It doesn't sit well with me. Unfortunately, it may well get engagement. So the marketers, and unless they're like really clued up on this kind of thing, will go, that's worked. And that kind of thing. So, but it kind of hasn't, in that respect. So, although people are viewing it, they're viewing it in quite a damaging way because they're going, these guys look really naff. Yeah, trash your brand. So I think the types of posts that you should be seeing on something like Instagram for sure. The rules of entertain and engage, and what's the third one? I've completely forgot that one now. Entertain, engage. What is it? Marketers in the background. Educate. Thank you so much. Those three rules still apply. It's just the format in which you do that, for sure. I was
going to say a lot of it comes down to that format now, especially as we've seen video increase. You see how one platform does it and starts to take off, and then the others kind of follow suit. And in the same way you started with like your quick TikTok videos, Instagram now has the reels. In the same way you've got shorts on YouTube. So it's adapting that format to kind of what's working. And you see that, especially when you're running kind of paid activity, when something does start to take off, it might be, oh, actually, if I use that placement or I use that format, I get a lower cost per click because I'm getting that engagement because Meta's suddenly showing videos now to everyone instead of actually any imagery. So it's getting that trade-off of the two again.
The interesting thing as well, I mean, I think it can always come back to, if you're trying to strategize kind of exactly what kind of content you're trying to do, and you're thinking, well, these guys are doing this and these guys are doing, maybe we should be doing that. I think it's really important to ask yourself the question of like, what would my audience want to consume? It's a lot of people kind of miss that step where we go, who am I actually speaking to, and what would they like to see from me, my brand, my business, whatever. And try and provide as much value as possible within that, while also testing and experimenting as well. That's really important. But understanding that the fundamentals of like there are going to be some things that don't engage that well, but are still really valuable to the brand, and there's some things that engage really well and are really damaging to the brand. And kind of understanding that kind of from the outside perspective, kind of what that is, but wherever possible, provide as much value as you can, through the content, and it'll do well.
I'm going to come back in a moment to kind of platform by platform advice, but I think we're moving quite naturally on to content, and kind of I think the term that you used in one of the Door 4 reports was thumb stopping content. Like what does that entail?
So I think the big thing is, I was going to just touch on it then, building off from what Daniel said, but I think a lot of it is knowing those pain points of your audience and what's actually going to solve that pain point for them. And a lot of the kind of scroll stopping, if you think people on social are just living their lives, probably watching TV but scrolling at the same time, so you really need something that stands out. And we were talking about it earlier, it's how do you invoke that reaction? Like, how do you get a response out of someone? And normally you can say, well, actually, emotion, whether you make them angry, whether you make them laugh, whether you make them cry, you're going to get a response if you have some form of emotional connection. We all know it with the John Lewis ad at Christmas. If it makes you cry, you're going to remember it. So I think it's tying into both that emotional side and the emotive response, but also making sure that means we're going to be memorable. And that ties into kind of all the creative that Daniel does, to say, well, actually, how does it invoke that reaction when we're looking at what type of content and creative we need to solve this customer's pain point?
I mean, one of the best bits of, just an anecdote from the industry, one of the best bits of social media content I've seen in the last year was a branch of NKM did an Oasis tribute band using just bits of stuff from around the branch. And it, the traction on it was enormous, but it made people laugh.
Yes.
And so, yeah, absolutely. Plug into emotion. That's how you're going to get a human response rather than just appealing to an algorithm, right?
Exactly.
Dan, let's talk a bit about how we work together on podcasting.
Yes.
What's that kind of format doing right now, and why is it something that we should be thinking about?
I mean, I thought about this last night because I thought I could do 2 hours on podcast productions for brands. I was sort of practicing kind of roughly what I would say in these kinds of scenarios. So stop me if I waffle. But podcast, I kind of pulled all of the things together that you could get from, let's say, a video podcast. Like, I'll only talk about video podcasts because I feel like they're the most valuable of the two. So if you create a video podcast, I worked out the amount of content that you could pull from something like that, and then I worked out the cost. And I said, pound for pound, like, it's the most valuable piece of content for the money that you can do. Like, way more, I guess, affordable than traditional video production and things like that. And so I think that's how brands can utilize podcasts. But I think what's happening is a lot of brands will go, like, I'm a brand. I see that you're saying you think I should have a podcast. What the hell would I talk about? Like I make taps. We make taps, let's say. What am I going to talk about? There's only so much I can say about making taps. And I think what a lot of brands kind of forget is essentially, again, that providing value. First of all, what are your marketing goals like for a podcast? What do you want it to achieve? Do you want brand awareness to your end user, which is a really good example? So not necessarily your buyer, but your end user. We want those guys to be looking for those kinds of products in their local retailer. So we want to be speaking out to those guys. So we'll make a podcast that provides value for them, and talking about taps probably isn't that valuable to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what if we created a podcast that provided some value in the form of entertainment or education? Perhaps we have nothing to do with the podcast production, and we just hire two really, really good hosts that are like really well known in the industry to create their own podcast, and we just slap our name on it, pull the cuts from it, and that thing blows up, and our name's all over that, and it's been a real big success because through these guys, we've got to a huge audience, and our name's kind of all over it. The most important value, I think, for however you kind of produce a podcast, is the podcast usually is the least valuable piece of content. That long form content is usually the least valuable bit from a promotional point of view. And I don't really know the hierarchy, but it's the transcript, it's the obviously the video, the audio, and the social clips. And I see a lot of brands at the moment. They'll sort of record a podcast, but it'll never go onto Spotify or iTunes. It's just going out on LinkedIn. It's just going out on Instagram, so that you can get those really nice, short, valuable sound bites, which is like great short form video content. But trying to film all of those individually with a production company would be ridiculously expensive. But you can sit in an hour in a podcast studio that looks great and film all of that. You can produce loads of great pieces of content. And one final thing on the podcast, because I know I'm rambling now. is tapping into other people's audience. So, so guests are a huge part of podcast production. So when let's say you create a podcast and you're a marketing manager of a bathroom company, probably no one knows who you are in comparison to like influencers and stuff. But if you create a podcast and bring those kinds of people in that have got huge audience, what you do is you borrow their audience for that episode and for those social clips, because they're probably going to collaborate on it. There's going to be great SEO stuff and things like that. You borrow their audience, you get in front of people that perhaps you weren't in front of in the first place, and it's still really cheap. And a lot of people will still go on podcasts for free, which I'm amazed about.
The thing that I think about podcasts as well, and we do insights pods with you guys at Dissident. We don't want to be the next Rest is Entertainment, right? We're not looking for massive numbers. We just want kind of maybe 300 or 400 of the right people listening every quarter. As basically a way of communicating. So I think even within podcasting, there's kind of horses for courses. What are you trying to achieve, and basically shape your approach based on what you're trying to achieve.
The interesting thing about that is like you figured out what you wanted to achieve with that podcast, which was to not to get out to thousands and thousands of people and have a Joe Rogan-esque show. What you wanted to do is to communicate in a slightly different way the stuff that you were communicating on other platforms and on other channels. But by creating a podcast, you created essentially a more attainable and enjoyable experience of getting information, or a different way of getting information. But also it's opened the door to probably 2 or 3 different platforms that you perhaps weren't on in the first place.
Yeah.
And, social media platforms, and obviously podcast platforms as well. So you're showing up in lots of different areas and producing high quality content, which again is great for positioning as well,
Beth, coming to you, because this springs directly out of what Dan was saying about clipping content from podcasts. Yeah. How does kind of short form video work on the different platforms, and what would you say to companies that maybe feel a bit intimidated about creating their own content?
I think it comes back to what I was saying earlier, really, with video especially. A lot of the platforms now are using video, especially since TikTok kind of took off. A lot of them have followed suit with Instagram introducing their formats, similar for how they do it now across, I think, to be honest, even Pinterest let you do video. So I think it's just that extra way to get in front of people. And if they want an answer and they're searching or they're researching, if you can explain that in a video, or you can get your point across in a video, you're going to get that extra engagement than you would just with an image. Obviously, we've seen loads of formats come and go over time, but when you've got the whole point of carousels or collections in Meta, it's showing more imagery and showcasing, but you could just do that so much easier in a video, and it's just getting that extra engagement. And obviously, because a lot of the platforms see that engagement, they reward you for it as well, so you will get shown more in the feeds. And I think people want organic content, even though it's obviously an ad. So even though it's daunting to think, I'm going to be in a video, or we're going to have to film a video, it doesn't mean you need to spend hundreds of pounds to do a professional video shoot. It can be very organic or even user-generated content, which is another level of actually building that authority by using people talking about you or talking about your products rather than you forcing it on people.
Yeah, so is that kind of the authenticity kind of shines through then, doesn't it?
That's it. People are talking about it or using the product actually in a real life scenario. It's so much better than just having somebody film it and it's being obvious that you've only filmed it for advertising.
So you filmed your content, you put it on a platform, you've got the engagement and the click. How do you then kind of take that click into the customer journey, especially for a high value product like a bathroom?
I think a lot of it is knowing at what stage in the journey that user's in. Knowing the way we kind of looking at it is kind of 3-pronged strategy to say, are they living, are they learning, or are they buying? If you're getting them at that living stage, they're not even in market at that point. They're scrolling social media, they're going through the platforms. You might have stood out to them, so they've clicked, they've engaged, but they're not actually ready to buy right now. But you know, from your targeting being very tailored to say, these types of people who one day will want to do a full bathroom suite or whatever it is, are the people I want to go after. You're keeping that in mind. If you've been memorable, you've planted that seed in their minds so that when they do consider it again in the future, you will come to mind. But then in the same way, when they do start researching, if you've made sure that your campaign's set up to track them and you've built your remarketing list, when they're doing searches again or they're starting to look in social platforms, you're appearing because you've actually said to those platforms, these people are actually valuable to me. They've been on my website before. I'll remarket to them. I'll bid up on those people because they're valuable. So it means that you've kind of fed them into that journey from both how you're targeting them, but also when they're ready at that journey, and even more so when they're at the buy-in stage. If they're actually searching for your product because they're actually at the point they want to buy, really bid up on them to make sure that you're prominent.
So that almost sounds like it's about a relationship with them rather than a transaction.
Yeah, and knowing that not every person's going to see your content, click it, engage with it, and convert straight away. You need to build those pulls up over time. And if you are targeting the right people, it is an investment piece. We talk about it as a current versus future demand. And a lot of video is future demand. You're kind of planting that seed, keeping that in mind. But to judge that as a success metric to say, well, how many conversions did I get for it? It's never going to happen. It's an investment of brand awareness, of they've come on the site, they've maybe looked around, but you've built them into your remarketing pool.
Dan, let's talk a little bit about brand tone. Basically, how far can you push it? How cheeky, irreverent can you be and get away with it?
You've been looking at our socials, haven't you? You're thinking, how are they getting away with this? It depends. Was that the third? Is that the third? It depends. It's genuinely all about. Again, it's all about positioning. It's so important that your tone of voice is relative to your positioning within the market, and also who you're engaging with. I think if you're a manufacturer, let's say your primary sort of target market and who you try to communicate with isn't necessarily the installers, but it's the retailers and stuff like that. I think as a brand, I would personally be a little bit more careful on how I do things. I probably wouldn't be super controversial in that respect, because I don't think that's what the retailers expect to hear from that brand. Let's say I'm kind of guessing here. If I was targeting the end users, I'm going to try potentially to adapt my tone and language more so towards them, so that they can relate to that. And if they're going to relate to a brand that's a little bit more cheeky, and that if that fits with the branding, with the values, with all that kind of stuff, I think that's great. What I wouldn't want to see is a bit like like my example earlier. This kind of like high-end, prestigious, Italian, whatever, this kind of beautiful, everything's like, avant-garde. And then they come out like with some horrendous language, and it's just a complete juxtaposition, and it's kind of a bit of a mess. But it very much depends on the brand. Personal brand, you can go nuts with that. Yeah. That's good fun because although there's going to be certain people like within a brand. Let's say you're a marketing director, you're a sales director, you're a bit of a personality. You can have fun with that to a certain extent, and you can go wild. But as a brand, it's all about positioning. It's all about how you position yourself within the market. What I would say is just like don't be wacky for the sake of it. Like it's like wacky for wacky's sake wouldn't benefit anybody.
Again, kind of come back to authenticity. If you're naturally a very gregarious, slightly wacky person, let that come through on social, right? If you're super serious, you're very let's say technical, being zany is just going to not feel authentic, is it?
No, and it's wherever you are as an entity. If you're a massive brand, that you've got to be careful about how you communicate that, because that doesn't have a person behind it, right? You've got to build some sort of personality into that to some extent. If you're let's say an installer or a sort of smaller business, perhaps you've got like a small team or something like that, you can bring that down a little bit more. And again, if you're an individual, if you are the business, be you for sure. And if you're okay with potentially upsetting some people, but bringing other people on board, and you know that you can sort of balance that, then go for it. Yeah, for sure. But it's all about experimentation as well, for sure.
Let's kind of go back to running through a few of the platforms. I think this is linked to brand tone, isn't it?
Yes.
So you can change your brand tone slightly for platform. LinkedIn. I was listening to a podcast this morning, which was talking about basically LinkedIn, since X has kind of annoyed a few people. LinkedIn seems to be kind of a much, much bigger platform. They kind of made something like $18 billion profit last year. How does LinkedIn, how can you communicate as someone in this marketplace on LinkedIn and make best use of it? Beth, do you want to?
I was hoping you were going to answer that, Beth, because I only listened to half of it.
I'll answer if you like. I have an answer. I think it comes back to that personal brand and having the authority. And if you essentially are on LinkedIn because you are a marketing director or a managing director of a brand and you're selling a product that people are interested in, you have authority in that area. You can give guidance, you can give content. In the same way, obviously, from us as marketers, we're probably always posting on LinkedIn kind of our thoughts and opinions on marketing. It shouldn't be any different for manufacturers or brands themselves, because they're the ones who know what they're talking about and making that relevant to the industry. So it's not just this is what we do as our company. It's actually having those thought leadership pieces and knowing what's going on in the industry to either offer guidance or give actually some discussion to say, well, this is what we're seeing and we know this is happening in the industry. How is it going for everyone else? And engaging in that conversation. And I think they're the ones that feel authentic and actually a natural kind of content within LinkedIn rather than the forced, oh, I'm just doing this for attention to get people liking my post on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But BMA, as was, now the Bathroom Association, took the decision probably about 8 months ago to leave the X platform.
Yes.
Just because it had become a kind of cesspit of misinformation, in our view.
Sure.
Was that a stupid decision, or how is X of any use whatsoever anymore?
Do you want that one, Beth?
I think it's a lot of noise, in all honesty. I think people are still on there, but I think people are on there with a pinch of salt. People go on knowing it may be controversial, knowing that they could get some different views. And there's, like I say, a lot of noise. So even taking any controversy out of it, there's just so much that goes on there. And it is such a fast-moving kind of feed. You don't really ever go searching for a brand on there. You just kind of scroll in. And I think to try and stand out amongst that, when you then throw in controversy as well, it's just difficult. And it comes down to where your audience is. If you turned around and said, well, actually, no, we know everyone who should join the Bathroom Association are on X, and I'd say, why the heck are you not on there?
Yeah.
But if you know they're not, what's the point in wasting your time?
For me, I use the word noise. I think that is exactly right. You basically to get anywhere on that platform, for me, you'd have to be really out there on tone.
Yeah.
Do you share that view, Dan?
I think so. I think X is a weird platform, and it's still a viable platform for some of the biggest brands, right? You know, the brands you expect to be on there, Virgin or whoever, they like EasyJet, places like that. That, you know, people have like the brand wars and stuff like that. It kind of makes sense for those guys. Smaller brands, I wouldn't consider like bathroom manufacturers to be. I wouldn't consider that to be a good choice to put all of your resource on social media. However, I do kind of have a rule that you should probably be everywhere. It's nice if you're everywhere. I don't follow that rule because I don't encourage any of my clients to be on X. I'm not on X, but I certainly wouldn't put a lot of resource into it. You know, it's fine if you're on there and content's going from here to here, and if someone catches you, great. Small touch points and stuff like that. But I certainly wouldn't be like, okay, my strategy for the next 12 months is like double down on X.
I think it's that balance, isn't it? Because like you say, be everywhere, but be everywhere your audience is. If not,
Yes.
You're just talking into the noise, and it's a waste of time. And we know, as marketers, we have limited resource. And if that is going to be, well, actually, I could be posting on LinkedIn or I could be posting on X, and you know your audience is on LinkedIn, then that's where you spend that time.
So just very briefly on the final couple of platforms, what I regard rightly or wrongly as like the Gen Z platforms. So Snapchat, TikTok. TikTok seems to be really taking off. What's your advice to companies that are thinking about using those?
If I was a manufacturer, again, it depends. That's the fourth one now, I think. It kind of depends because I think it kind of goes back to that thing of like when you sort of research what should be happening on TikTok. There needs to be authentic content of people. It needs to be lo-fi. It needs to be, you know, jumping on trends and all that kind of thing. That kind of works for individuals and for some brands, but I wouldn't necessarily go, okay, I'm a bathroom manufacturer. Let's jump on this trend here and this trend here and this trend here. We get all of our team doing all these kind of different, strange TikTok things that kind of don't make any sense and things like that. It could work, but I would sort of probably advise against that and consider the fact that if there's content that's creating value for your audience on a different platform like Instagram, you can totally put it on TikTok. A lot of people will tell you not to do that, but I would say it's absolutely fine in the right circumstances. And I think bathroom manufacturers, that would be the right circumstance for sure.
I think it ties in as well to that point to say, well, if you've got the right kind of content and know your audience, at what stage are they at for when they are looking on these platforms? And it's the difference between if you were to do, say, a bathroom makeover, you're going to start researching and looking for inspiration. If people are searching for kind of bathroom layout within TikTok, you want to be one of those videos that's showing up. In the same way, if they were looking on Pinterest and obviously searching in that way and building the boards because they're pinning everything, you'd want to be there. And I think then the only difference being for the likes of a Snapchat, one, it's obviously going to be a generational thing of which audience is there, but also getting that balance to say, well, this is going to be like a 5-second video. Is it going to give them anything other than knowing who we are? If it's a brand campaign and you're just going to make yourself memorable so that when they go to actually plan the bathroom, they'll remember you, then great. But if they're not, it's again whether it's worthwhile.
Brilliant. A couple of final questions. Influencer marketing. Dan, you kind of touched on this a little bit on the podcast questions. Is it all hype or is there some merit in it?
There's definitely merit in using influencers or content creators in your marketing and in social media. You do have to be careful. I wouldn't rely on it. There's some brands that strangely do really well with almost no professional content. They rely wholly on influencers to do all of their marketing for them, but you're kind of putting your brand in their hands, which is a very dangerous thing for me. So having a pinch of a bit of everything when it comes to social media is great. A great ad strategy, a great influencer strategy, great organic strategy, great community management. All of those things are going to play into success. Kind of depends on the brand, of course, but engaging with influencers is having them create content for you, potentially to repost onto your platforms if that works for your positioning, is a really, really good shout. But I think what a lot of people think when people think of influencers, they think of someone that's like money grabbing. They want a load of money for a one reel and it's just and hope for the best type thing.
There's a lot of them about, aren't there?
Yeah. Those people exist, and to some extent, that's a strategy that could work. But let's say we've got a brand who's got more of a limited budget for what they can do with influencers, or what they can do with marketing in general. The micro influencer in the construction industry is such a valuable tool. Like the sort of 3,000 to 10,000 followers on whatever platform. Let's just say Instagram, because TikTok can blow up and you can have tons of followers, but none of them on the market, right? It can just be all sorts of strange people on TikTok. Let's say you got 3,000 to 10,000 followers or slightly more. Typically, those kinds of accounts have got like a really cult following. They're on the tools on the regular. They are still a tradesperson, whereas the real big accounts, a lot of them don't even work in the trade anymore. They're kind of it's like fabricated content. So they've got that authenticity there, which is really, really good. But also from a budget point of view, and this is just me sort of speculating, I would rather have my budget spread across multiple accounts doing all sorts of different things than putting all of my money into one pot for one creator and minimal amounts of content. Potentially huge views, but yeah, that's what I would do. I think that's a clever use of marketing for budget.
I think feeding on from that, that's what I was going to suggest, is kind of having that longevity to it so that you don't just get this one big spike because one big influencer spoke about you in one video. But actually, like you say, if you can pay for 10 micro influencers versus one, you are going to get that spread out effect instead of actually just seeing a big spike and then it disappearing again. And also with those micro guys, it's a lot more, coming back to the same point we've said a few times, it is more authentic. They are using the product or they are talking about the product in the day-to-day life. It's not just I'm talking about this because I've been paid to.
Yeah.
I think that's great insight. One final question before we wrap up. What's the kind of next thing in digital marketing and using social media for companies to expand, in your view?
I've got a rubbish one because I'm not very good with like future thinking and stuff like that. A good rule of thumb in the construction industry, not obviously agents, there's some incredible marketers in the industry as a whole. But if you sort of think about the generalized kind of marketing in construction and the industry as a whole, typically it's about 5 years behind everybody else. So if you're looking at something like a consumer brand, fashion, whatever, look at what they're doing, and that's probably going to happen in about like 3 to 5 years' time for the as a whole. So you'll start to see your competitors using those kinds of tactics for sure. Clever marketers, clever agencies and stuff are getting on whatever's working a lot quicker than that. What I'm starting to see a lot of brands doing is really that sounds silly, taking digital seriously. Like, do you know what I mean? I it's weird that we still have to use the word digital, but there are brands out there going, oh, well, we'll give this social media a go now, and we'll hire a really creative agency, and we'll start to think creatively because the stuff that we were doing before, which was just having a great sales force, some great catalogs, and some POS, isn't going to cut it in the next 5 years. I would say.
I think for me, it's more of the strategic view to actually get people when they are still in that living stage. I think we've gone through this 5-10 years cycle where a lot of marketers are being so hit over the head to get an ROI on everything they're doing that we have naturally gone after who's in market, who can we target now, who's going to buy now. But there's that realization coming back saying there's only going to be so many of those people. We need to be reaching people earlier on before they're even thinking they need that product, having that awareness then, so that when they do come into the market, they've already got us in mind. So I think it's kind of going back old school to say brand awareness, to then feed your funnel, to then be able to remarket. But I think a lot of that is coming more and more, and being able to utilize budget in that way where it's not just based off what ROI am I getting from it.
That is massive. Like, having the trust in your marketing team or an agency to go, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to put something in place. And in a year, you're going to start to see results from this. And just trust me, it's going to work. And we're going to experiment, we're going to play and stuff like that. But you are not going to get results straight away. Give me time. That's huge. That is massive.
Convincing a CEO to say, I'm putting budget behind something, but I can't tell you ROI until next year.
Take some
balls.
courage. Yeah, absolutely. Beth, and Dan, thanks so much for your insights. If you like this sort of information, we have a marketing group that sits within our Insights live events. So if you want to get more involved in this, come and have a chat with us about getting involved with the Bathroom Association. I could have carried on for another hour talking about this stuff. I find it fascinating. But for now, please show your appreciation for our Moors.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.